He stood there, hands raised, eyes filled with anger. Officer Lawson's hatred was palpable, while the crowd stood frozen. Then, someone stepped through the door. His presence shook everything. He locked eyes with Lawson, and for a moment, time stopped. What happened next will make you question everything. But let's start from the beginning. Officer Richard Lawson had always been known for his harshness, but today, his cruelty seemed to know no bounds. The rain fell relentlessly over Brooklyn's grim streets, but it did little to wash away the tension in the air. Lawson stopped Michael Grant, a black man in his mid-30s, for something as trivial as a dim taillight. But Michael knew better than to think this stop was about the car. Lawson's tone was venomous, every word dripping with contempt. "You people never learn," he spat, his hand pushing Michael forcefully against the cold metal of his car. The impact made Michael's breath catch. His heart raced as the officer's harsh grip dug into his shoulder. He raised his hands instinctively, not to resist, but to show he wasn't a threat, his arms trembling slightly under the weight of the officer's aggression. "Don't even think about it," Lawson barked, his words sharper than the chill in the air. Michael stood there, his chest tight with anger and humiliation. Every word from Lawson felt like a slap, each one more degrading than the last. But Michael had learned long ago that speaking out could escalate the situation, and a confrontation with a cop like Lawson was never worth it. His anger smoldered inside, but outwardly, he kept his composure. He had been down this road before. He knew the rules. Silence was often his only defense. The streets had taught him that lesson early: how to hold his ground, how to swallow his pride, and how to survive. His hands, still raised, trembled, but he clenched his jaw, unwilling to let the officer see how deeply the words had cut. It was a cruel game, and Michael had played it too many times to count. But every encounter, every humiliation, chipped away at him in ways no one could see. Yet today, something felt different. Something was about to change. The courtroom felt suffocating, the air thick with unspoken tension as Michael took his seat. His palms were clammy, his stomach a tight knot. He had filed a complaint against Officer Lawson for the racially charged insult, but he knew the odds were stacked against him. The defense team sat confidently, their posture unbothered, while the prosecutor seemed to stumble over her words, her voice wavering as if she already knew the battle was lost. The judge, an older white man with deep lines etched into his face, barely gave Michael a glance, his eyes fixed on the papers in front of him, as if he were already making up his mind. As the trial unfolded, Michael's unease grew. Lawson sat there, unnervingly calm, his eyes never straying from the proceedings. He had a smug confidence, as if the outcome was already decided, and this was just another routine day in the office. The officer's lawyer, smooth and practiced, tore into Michael's character with precision, questioning his intentions and painting him as someone with a motive to ruin Lawson's career. The words felt like punches, each one landing harder than the last. Michael's confidence began to falter, the anger from that rainy day slowly transforming into frustration. His hands clenched at his sides, but he kept his gaze forward, trying to steady himself. He had been so sure that justice would be on his side, but now, sitting here in this room full of indifferent faces, it was becoming painfully clear. The system was not built for someone like him. It was rigged, designed to protect the very people who had wronged him. A wave of helplessness washed over him. The courtroom had turned into a cold reminder of the powerlessness he had felt too many times before. And as the trial dragged on, Michael wondered if he would ever get the justice he so desperately sought. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence as the doors creaked open. Michael's eyes shot toward the entrance, expecting another round of procedural monotony. Instead, a tall, imposing figure in a sharp suit entered, his presence commanding attention as soon as he stepped inside. Detective William Blake. Michael's pulse quickened. He'd seen this man before, but he couldn't place where. The detective's eyes scanned the room with quiet authority, his gaze briefly meeting Michael's before he made his way to the front of the courtroom. Blake exchanged a few words with the judge, then stood tall, his posture exuding calm confidence. The judge, clearly puzzled by the unexpected appearance, addressed him. "Detective Blake, may I ask why you're here today?" Blake's voice was smooth, measured, every word deliberate. "I'm here to testify. I'm Lawson's superior officer." A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Michael's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a witness. This was a revelation. Blake's words hung heavy in the air. "Officer Lawson has a history of misconduct," he continued, his tone steady and unwavering. "I've been keeping track of his actions for some time now. The behavior you've heard in this trial is just the tip of the iceberg." Michael's mind raced as the detective went on, listing incident after incident, a trail of complaints stretching far beyond the single encounter in question. Blake spoke of racial profiling, of abuse of power, of a pattern that had been building for years. It was like a punch to the gut, the twist Michael hadn't seen coming. The officer who had treated him with such cruelty wasn't untouchable. He was already under investigation. Michael's jaw dropped as Blake's words sank in. The man who had once seemed like an unmovable force, an embodiment of systemic power, was on the verge of losing everything. His career, his reputation, all crumbling in front of Michael's eyes. By the time the trial came to an end, Lawson's fate was sealed. The verdict was swift and definitive. He was stripped of his badge, his career shattered, and now he faced criminal charges for the very abuses he had inflicted. Michael stood quietly in the courtroom, a strange sense of relief beginning to wash over him. The trauma he had endured, those long months of fear, humiliation, and helplessness, still lingered. But now it felt different. There was justice, and with it, a flicker of peace he hadn't dared to hope for. As Michael left the courthouse, the weight of the day seemed to lift from his shoulders. His steps were lighter than they had been in years, as if the heavy burden that had once seemed so insurmountable had been finally set down. The change in him was subtle, but undeniable. For the first time, he didn't feel trapped by the system that had wronged him. He didn't feel powerless anymore. He had fought, and won. There was a shift, a crack in the foundation of a world that had once seemed rigid and unyielding. Michael glanced up at the sky as he stepped out into the sunlight. The rays cut through the haze of clouds, warming his face. He inhaled deeply, feeling something he hadn't in years. Hope. It was a small feeling, but it was there, growing stronger with each breath. Detective Blake's unexpected intervention had changed everything. He had done what no one else could, standing up for Michael when it seemed like no one would. It wasn't just about the victory over Lawson. It was about knowing that sometimes, even the most broken systems could be challenged. As Michael walked away from the courthouse, he realized that the road ahead would still be long, but now it didn't seem so impossible. There was a path forward, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he could walk it.